My first question is actually going to be, well, tell me about your perimenopause and menopause journey, if you'd be down, and what were some of your biggest aha moments? Would you be open to that question?
Okay, yes.
I think it's nice to hear, from an expert's perspective of, okay, I knew all of this and still I was a little shook. I think every doctor and expert I talk to, they're still like, I thought I was prepared, but I wasn't, so.
I was living in Madison, Wisconsin, where I went to pharmacy school as well, just working in a retail pharmacy. And I actually was getting recruited too, because two doctors, Joel Hargrove and Wayne Maxson, had perfected pretty much a delivery system with oral micronized progesterone in oil and published this. And this was in collaboration and understanding Dr. Katarina Dalton's foundational work on describing premenstrual syndrome, PMS, and the use of progesterone. And what they wanted to show was that rather than use vaginal suppositories, as Dr. Dalton had moved to after using injectable, you could get the same results with oral progesterone. And it was indeed the case that you could. And they had hoped to start a series of PMS clinics throughout the US and have compounding pharmacy associated with it to provide the compounded progesterone in oil. And what ended up happening was the PMS clinic failed. And it wasn't because of the concept, it was because they chose a poor administrator to get it going. But interest was growing enough, so the pharmacy grew and grew and grew. And the owner of the pharmacy, Wally Simons, was a neighbor of mine and friend and colleague. And I told him once, oh, I don't know if I could speak to women with PMS all day long, but eventually that's exactly what I did. The interesting thing about it was it never ceased to be the same thing every day. There are nuances with every single person that need to be looked at and examined. So the therapy was really, really effective. Starting dose was 100 milligrams of progesterone in oil 4 times a day, divided doses, and increase from there.
So we're talking 100 milligrams times 4.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'm just double checking. It wasn't 25 times 4.
It could be more oral
or more.
Time went on, we offered more options: creams, vaginal suppositories, rectal solutions, lozenges, drops, everything you could do to get progesterone being absorbed and utilized. So at the time, I did count up once, like the number of milligrams one woman was using was which is particularly high, 2,500 milligrams before she got to be comfortable. And then we would have a situation, and we called it breakthrough. And so do the practitioners prescribing for these women understand the concept of breakthrough. Sometimes their regular dose didn't quite make it, and symptoms would slip in. And so they might have a faster acting progesterone lozenge, for example, something to pull them back up into their safety zone. So you brought up an interesting point. At one time, I did wonder about this. So we're raising up progesterone. What about the estrogen? So we could get women to be comfortable, and it's still my goal. Why not start with progesterone and get to a point of some sort of comfort, and you have the time to think about or examine what's going on. Why is this demand of estrogen and maybe adrenaline and whatnot, why is this demand so high in that particular woman? So then I think at your leisure, then from comfort, you can look at what's causing excess estrogen, excess adrenaline, excess histamine. All of these things can be looked at then. So that's how I like to work with women. I want them to be first and foremost comfortable. And this is really empowering, because when dosing progesterone, you have to be ready to change your dose to accommodate maybe a breakthrough, as we called it then, and use more when you needed more.
And By a breakthrough is, because I always think of a breakthrough as like, oh, a moment of like, oh, like I get this big breakthrough. But what you're talking about is, you're dosing a woman with progesterone, and then there's a moment where the effectiveness at some point in the day may not be working as well. And so you can give a smaller dose that's fast acting that can kind of bump up and ease symptoms until the next dose is administered. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly. Let's use like a headache as a symptom. So you're doing okay, and then you feel this low grade headache starting, and that can be a symptom of progesterone deficiency. So right away, dose extra so it doesn't go to a full blown headache.
Got it. Okay. Now, and let me understand this as well. When you were initially prescribing what a lot of us would consider higher dose progesterone, just initially in your work, it was really for PMS. And this is predominantly for women in like childbearing years, 20s, 30s, obviously into our 40s, but not necessarily yet women who we know defaults, we're just going to lose her progesterone. She's going to go away. Wasn't that yet? Or were you working with women in perimenopause as well, where you knew those levels were declining?
Okay, the focus at first was younger women, and
who should have had reasonable progesterone, potentially.
Right, potentially. But they had these symptoms, and the symptoms responded beautifully to progesterone. Mm-hmm. So I had an epiphany when, after some years, women started calling back and saying, I used progesterone very successfully for my PMS symptoms, and now I'm perimenopausal. I feel those symptoms coming back. Can I use progesterone? And what was astounding to me, I had in my brain when I first started with PMS was forever, right? No, it's not forever. And I believe the younger you are and you correct this progesterone deficiency, you have potential there for using it for a while and then sort of resetting your body. Because when you have more progesterone, you're giving feedback to the pituitary luteinizing hormone. Probably that's getting normalized and things start to go better for you. So PMS is not forever. And the younger you are, the better off. So these same symptoms, they're the very same symptoms, crop up at perimenopause when you're starting to stop ovulating with sometimes I think any frequency. Dr. Jerry Lynn Pryor just did a study, and she had 100 women in her study, ages 18 to 35, healthy women. The focus of the study was something else, but she monitored the menstrual cycle as part of her research interest. And in these 100 women over the course of the year, and the year was 2020, she found 68% of those women experienced missed ovulations and shortened luteal phase, which means less progesterone being produced. And she had done a similar study about 5 years earlier with 300 women, and the incidence was 10%. So we had this massive shift into hormone dysregulation going on. And I think there's probably there's a truth from this smaller group to our society as a whole. We're having some real problems.
And we're talking about, anovulatory cycles in childbearing years. You're saying 20s and 35.
The 35.
So again, 35 maybe being the beginning point of perimenopause for some women, but here we're seeing kind of what looks like could be kind of perimenopausal symptoms, or at least PMS symptoms, even in at least 10 to 25, 30% of the time in healthy aged women and healthy women overall. Mm-hmm. It's really fascinating. Which really explains why so many of us are struggling even in our 20s and our 30s. So I'm curious, with all the research that you've seen, I've read a lot of Dr. Pryor's research as well, and progesterone being just obviously I love all the hormones. I really do. I think they're all doing the best they can, doing really great things for us. Progesterone being one of my absolute favorites. But right now we see a big spotlight, and maybe it's always been that there's a spotlight on estradiol, even with the kind of reemergence of hormone replacement therapy. I'm still hearing kind of old school thinking that, especially with HRT, hormone replacement therapy, that if you don't have a uterus, you don't need progesterone. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. That is a full body no to me.
If you don't have a uterus, I will 100% guarantee you that it is because of a long lasting progesterone deficiency in the first place, or you had never gone to surgery. And it's quite appalling because in the US, 600 to 700,000 hysterectomies are performed every year. And with intervention earlier with progesterone, I think most of them would be unnecessary. It's a huge criminal kind of behavior. And the ignorance feeds it because practitioners don't know how to use progesterone and the general public doesn't have enough information on it. That has led to really this atrocity. So then what do we do for women post-hysterectomy? The conventional wisdom, and coming from groups like Endocrine Society, North American Medical Society,
Yes, yeah.
ACOG, American Academy of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So they're responsible for that statement. And why in the world would that be? And I think it's very much pharma directed, people sitting on committees and without any attention paid to normal human physiology. Do you have any hormone in your body that works in one place?
No, they're not working in a silo.
Why would progesterone only work on your uterus? Your whole body needs progesterone, and your whole body's been deficit. Katarina Dalton did address this too. She said women with hysterectomy need far more progesterone than women having normal menopause with aging. Their deficiency is much greater. And it's true, makes good sense to me. And that's what you're going to find. If that woman with hysterectomy is able to come to you and you help her with progesterone, you've given her life back to her. Because she's going to be having trouble with sleep, anxiety, she'll be given benzo, she'll be depressed, she'll be high blood pressure, diabetes, everything is predictable. Then the same people say you have to have estrogen for your bones. Well, there is a situation, this was described by Dr. Ray Peat, and he said that prolactin levels are high prolactin levels, unless you have a tumor, are due to high estrogens and low thyroid. And progesterone does bring down prolactin in a case like that. And he said, if you leave somebody in that state, parathyroid hormone is stimulated by the rise in prolactin, and this is in turn is going to suck the calcium out of your bones. So the very thing that doctors are saying to their patients, well, you have to have estrogen to protect your bones, because they're doing it in such an unbalanced fashion, they are actually destroying bones.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I am grateful that the conversation around HRT is back on the table and that these are being available to women, but there is a lot of misinformation and, and even just around, like you said, kind of pharma driven dosage. Currently the majority of women, if they're getting oral micronized progesterone, which is obviously like the standard based on the work that you saw play out years ago, it's very standardized, 100, 200 milligrams, and that's it. And that's it.
I don't know where that came from. And it's really particularly appalling when women choose to use pellets.
Yeah. I didn't know they were pelleting progesterone, though. I thought it was only...
No, they're not. They're not. They're using oral progesterone. And the pellets would have to be huge because you need a huge number. You would need so much of it. But they do give extraordinarily high doses of testosterone and estradiol with the standard 200 milligrams of progesterone.
Right. So you're getting the oral progesterone, but you're putting these pellets in your booty, and and once they're in. You can't get them out.
And it's very strong. I had one client she was deciding to stop the pellets, but she was bleeding for 9 months, totally bleeding. and on the 200 milligram dose. So she came to me and I said, you have to use more progesterone. You have to get to a level where you balance the estrogen you have so it's not continuously building up new tissue. She got there in a couple months, and it was 800 milligrams topically that got her to stop bleeding. In the meantime, this very anxious older woman became very bright. Her skin improved. She was nice and happy, and she was a totally different personality from her very anxious, bleeding personality. So it was a total transformation. And she decided, because she needed prescriptions for testosterone and maybe she wanted some estradiol too, she decided to do a consult with a doctor who was fairly skilled in doing hormones. So she texts me and she goes, imagine my surprise when this doctor offered me a prescription for 50 milligrams of progesterone.
Wow.
I knew what she said next. And she did say after a while, she goes, I think I would like some estrogen now, because estrogen too, estradiol is a very valuable hormone. And I said, good, go for it. And I said, you know what to do. So if you need to adjust your progesterone to accommodate that, you do it, or take a little less. One of the things that people don't readily recognize is any estrogen that's in your body already is potentiated by progesterone. And that leads to this problem one Facebook group calls estrogen kickback. And this is the problems we see when we have a low dose of progesterone started, and everything magnifies all the estrogen related symptoms: breast tenderness, breast pain, water retention, headache, anxiety, panic. It can send women to the emergency room, think they're dying with a heart attack. It can be that severe, and you've provoked it with a little amount of progesterone. What you need to do is go up, go up, go up to get beyond that point. I saw this in a medical paper. They called it progesterone inversion. That the small doses produce adverse effects, the higher doses produce the effect that you want. There's this gray zone where if progesterone isn't adequate for all the things that progesterone does, you can be kind of miserable. And for God's sakes, don't stay there. Use use more and more till you flip out of it. And it's kind of scary how many women are really preconditioned to be afraid of this. Some of them tried some of the over-the-counter creams. They'll have 15 milligrams, 20 milligrams, and they went through hell with that little bit of progesterone. So they know they can't possibly use progesterone because they are sensitive, they're allergic. And so when you ask them to take progesterone and they react at 20 milligrams, then I might say you need 400 milligrams as a starting dose. They can hardly comprehend.
Yeah, I'm sure their mind's blown. They're just like, yes, that's a whole lot more than the 20 that I did and didn't like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine. But yeah, this, I mean, flips a lot of things on its head. I mean, I'm only at 200 and I'm still experiencing symptoms. And I thought to myself, do I go up? And I've had a lot of conversations, but honestly, catching one of yours, especially with some of that, especially my late luteal symptoms. Like I'm in late luteal right now, and things are ratcheting up pretty well. I give my husband full notice. Like I just notice, my stress resilience
zero symptoms. Zero. It needs to be all fine.
My symptoms are increasing right now. And so I moved up to 300. I just moved up to 300 yesterday, but now after our conversation, I'm gonna jump up to 4 and see how I do. And because I mean, obviously I want the reason why I'm taking it in the first place, not only for prevention and, preventing, brain inflammation. I used high dosage when I had a brain injury last summer. It was very much a part of my concussion protocol. But then I was like, okay, well, my brain's probably better. I'm going to say a little bit better. And so I went back down to 2 and, realizing I probably should have stayed at the 4. But I'm in Perry, so I cycle it. I track my cycle, and I know that there are definitely months where I don't have an ovulatory cycle, but I still cycle it. And there's a lot of conversation or I guess debate around continuous or cycling progesterone in menopause or postmenopause. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're talking about the Wiley protocol and the high
Static. Because, yeah.
I certainly tried it. Really high estrogen makes you feel wonderful. And I think they don't use enough progesterone to accommodate the estrogen they have. There have been several individuals who are building up their endometrium on that protocol, even though the progesterone is pretty generous in their instructions. What they're missing is they have no progesterone during the first part of the cycle they're creating, no progesterone there. Normally, your body would be making a lot of progesterone there coming from your adrenal glands. So if you are stressed at all, and who isn't?
Who isn't?
Your adrenal progesterone goes whipped over to help create corticosteroids, hydrocortisone, and derivatives to help you handle stress. So it's gone. So less potential progesterone plus high doses of estrogen, building up some pretty big layers. And then when the second part of the cycle occurs, even though the amount of progesterone is generous under normal circumstances, there are women who are not bleeding. And this is going on for months and months.
That's not good. Yeah.
That's not good. That needs to be shed. I have no objection with higher doses of hormones. I think we're probably underutilizing all of them. I think we could be let's be at 3/4 of the range instead of just barely making it to cover your most severe symptoms.
Yeah, just getting rid of the hot flashes. But you know, not worrying about the cardiovascular risk or dementia down the road. But as long as yes, I find we're low dosing on all of it for a lot of women statically.
Yes. And for being postmenopause myself, I prefer just to be daily. And that's what in fact menopause is. Or I would maybe call it adrenal pause, because they say about 80% of women hit the wall when the ovaries stop producing as many hormones. So you're 100% dependent on your adrenal glands for your sex hormone functioning. And when that's not there for you, that's when you hit the wall. So menopause is really supporting your adrenal glands and your adrenal production of hormones to carry on and have a vital lifestyle.
Okay. So from what I gather from your own experience is that continuous usage is really going to protect that uterus and protect us overall. I do know women who have kind of perfected that, you know, rhythmic cycling progesterone, obviously estradiol every single day, and they are having bleeds and it's working out for them. And it's, you know, they're seeing the monthly bleed. And the claim is that closer to physiological levels is going to help, you know, prevent chronic diseases down the road and increase our health span. But, you know, in the other camp, even from a woman's perspective, is a lot of women are so excited that they're entering menopause and they don't ever have to bleed again. So, you know, we've got a lot of different.
You don't. But there are situations like a breakthrough bleeding. So the same two doctors, Hargrove and Maxon, within a short time also published a paper combining their combination was 0.5 milligram of estradiol with 100 milligrams of progesterone to take twice a day in menopause. And that got to be kind of popular, and then variations thereof got to be popular. And you can be going along just fine. Let's say that was your dose and you felt pretty comfortable and you like your hormone therapy. And then all of a sudden you're bleeding. Now what? So if you go to your conventional doctor, you have to have a full workup.
Yeah, ultrasounds, maybe biopsy, the whole nine. Like you go down the rabbit hole for sure.
Right. So the first question I would ask if somebody called with some vaginal bleeding, I'd say, okay, so have you been under any stress in the last couple months? And inevitably, it's a huge one. Even it's not little stress. Somebody died, they moved, they got divorced, huge stresses, and then along comes a couple months later, they're bleeding. And this is what I think happens during that time of the stress. Your body is diverting the progesterone over to the corticosteroids. And so estrogen has the opportunity to build up the endometrium. Then things calm down, you settle down. You're still on your very same dose every day. and then all of a sudden you're bleeding. Now your progesterone has been available to do its secretory function. And I want to emphasize that because not everybody understands how that works. In the first part of the luteal phase, ovulation to bleeding, the first half, progesterone helps stabilize and enrich that endometrium to prepare for the egg. The second part, when there's no egg, progesterone becomes a secretory hormone. It prepares that tissue to be shed. So this indeed is what's probably happening during the breakthrough bleeds. And it really means that you have, if this occurs with more than one time, you need to adjust your dosing. You might need a little more progesterone, a little less estrogen, one or the other. Should be adjusted to your circumstances if that's occurring with any frequency. But the first thing to check for is stress in the not too distant past.
I'm curious if we know we have a stressor like divorce, it's not like a one and done, you do it in a day kind of a thing. So let's say you are on hormone replacement, whether you're in perimenopause or menopause, and you're needing that support, and you come into a life circumstance where you're going to need more support. So in that moment, could you preemptively?
Absolutely.
Dosage. Okay.
Absolutely. Even happy stress, you're going on vacation for 2 weeks. Use more progesterone. You're out of your normal circumstances. You have to adjust to a different place, a travel, a plane, a car, or something. So this is additional stressors. If you really want to enjoy that vacation, use extra progesterone in advance.
Love that.
If you don't, you might have a bleed little
later. I'm curious, kind of this is what I've been playing with in looking at the research, but also in my own N of 1. So that first week of my luteal phase, I'm okay. I'm, almost 45. And then I head into the second week, and it is, heads are rolling. Okay. And so what I've been doing is I've increased my progesterone in the second week.
Yeah.
And that's just, I'm like, I know I'm needing more support right now to get through this next 7 days or so. Maybe even a little bit into my period. Just because it feels stressful.
Yes, it is. And you said something very interesting here. We've all been taught, and all the menstrual charts show you that at the end of the menstrual cycle, you get this dip in estrogen and progesterone, and that's what brings on the bleeding. And they don't think it's progesterone that brings on the bleeding. And I'll say this because of my experience with the PMSers. And what you just said, you can have symptoms 1, 2, 3 days into bleeding, and the PMSers never drop their dose, but were as regular as anything because they were younger women. They didn't need a drop in progesterone to start bleeding. So something else is in play. And one of my theories is that you have to have enough progesterone, kind of area under the curve calculus, if you will.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay.
That you have enough progesterone that you achieve that secretory function that is prepared. And it's the progesterone itself that's going to help you bleed, not the absence or withdrawal of progesterone that makes you bleed. And so this is misunderstood a lot. I follow some Facebook groups to see where we're failing women.
And what you're speaking to is most of us are told that the day before our period starts or the day our period starts, shut it off, like no more progesterone. So what you're arguing, what you're explaining here is that we may be getting this wrong.
Yes. Yeah. And so you're shortchanging. And women are surprised, and so are their practitioners, because you stop the progesterone and no bleeding happened. So they're getting shortchanged. And of course, there's probably PMS-like symptoms still into the first few days of bleeding. So a lot of people are confused about that. You do not have to stop progesterone to bring on a bleed.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you mentioned that. Again, I've been playing with it because toying with my bleeds are coming, for me as a mom to a very young beautiful boy, I want as much emotional resilience as I can muster, to be kind and gentle and wonderful to him. I had a moment today where I know I'm at the end of my migraine. I'm going to bump up my progesterone, but my husband and I are in business together, and I was overstimulated because of the side effect of the migraine, and he was jumping all over the place on a computer screen, and I was like, ah, I can't. And he's like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, well, my period's 4 days away, I'm post migraine, and this is driving me crazy. Like I just needed to let him know that obviously there was something more at play here. And so now everyone's on alert. I'm seeing these changes. So then that leads me to the next question. More progesterone. That's what it's going to be like. I think you just need more progesterone. And that's, you get that nagging feeling or that deep feeling, that intuition that you just need more. And that's been kind of what's been talking to me this past several months.
So your headache can be treated with progesterone. There are such a things as a low estrogen headache.
Yes.
But I believe that the vast majority of the headaches, the migraine type, are low progesterone. And you can apply it directly to your neck and your temples in a cream, and do it every 15, 20 minutes till the headache's gone.
I love that idea. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it because they're pretty debilitating. Obviously, migraines are not fun. And that brings me actually to application. So again, most women like myself, I mean, I can get it compounded, but I have hundreds of Prometrium tablets in my house right now. So I'm not lacking for that. But some women are getting it compounded as well. Maybe they have a peanut allergy, or for whatever reason, maybe they need an extended release. But the kind of this, what I see recommended, and often what I'm recommending to my patients is, especially for the anxiety and the sleep issues and what I call kind of the mental chatter. They just can't get to sleep, as I'm normally recommending it in the evening before bed. But I know that you've played a lot with timing and obviously we've been talking about dosage. Is it a yes and, pills and cream? Which should women be playing with it if they're not seeing the symptom relief? Where do you land on that?
Okay. Well, I land in favor of progesterone in any way, shape, or form.
Love it. So I find that most women can't get it in cream. Like go to their typical OBGYN or most doctors, Prometrium is where it's at. Like that's what they're often going to get. And it's inexpensive.
Approved product. Yeah. And quinone is another option for vaginal use. And this was actually developed by a professor I had at the University of Wisconsin. Progesterone, and the base it's in is the same as Replens, the lubricant. And it was developed so it would stick to the vaginal walls for a while. So he incorporated progesterone into that too, to help that improve absorption of the vaginal insertion of progesterone. So that's not a bad dosage form. Creams can be very good, but there can be a problem with absorption.
Yes, I know.
And it can be very much not taken up. So as your skin ages, or as you're hypothyroid, you have to have skin oils on your skin to dissolve some of the progesterone in a cream. Some of it's in suspension, and it'll just sit there and you can feel it. You get granular stuff on your skin. To get that in, you need more oil. What you could do, if it's happened to you, you can use some olive oil, coconut butter, some lotion you like to use to provide some more oils to get that dissolved, to get that in. The other thing that happens when you're hypothyroid is your circulation to the skin is not good. So it has to get through the skin barrier and then into your circulation. So that's not happening very efficiently either. Yeah. So if it can be a bigger problem as we age, and if there's a low thyroid problem, which is common.
A lot of us. It's me already. Yeah. And not that I don't take, I have my second dose of thyroid medicine in a little minute. But yeah, and especially as we enter perimenopause and postmenopause, we see more women struggling with low thyroid function, whether they know it or not.
So cream is difficult. So one of the over-the-counter cream companies, I saw this on their Facebook page, somebody came up with the idea of freezing progesterone cream in a gummy mold for gummy bears, if you make.
Yeah. I heard you talking about this. Yeah.
How clever we are. That's the problem. Is
women are so clever.
Yes. So it makes perfect sense. So instead of using it on the skin, the transmucosal in the vaginal area gives added absorption, or they can use it rectally. They essentially created a suppository on their own, which is really, really fabulous. Sometimes sublingual is really good. I'm consulting with a company who's doing a nano emulsion of progesterone, which works very well, and you can use smaller doses. It may overcome this skin barrier thing for topical, but it's early days. We don't have good data on it, but I know it works. One of the things a lot of people don't know, our Schwann cells in our nervous system tissue, they make their own progesterone, pregnenolone, and it's used right there. We're not going to see it on it.
Yeah, literally manufactured and used in the brain.
And right too, the brain, the same thing. And the really wonderful part of this is if you use progesterone, those cells will take it up. I was at a lecture. The man who lectured told me later at a reception that he thought he was going to fall over because he couldn't feel his feet. And so I gave him some progesterone to rub on his feet. And he comes back by me later and he's dancing around. He goes, "Oh, what have you done to me? I can feel my feet." And it was quick. And he was very disappointed. It wore off. I said, "Well, you have to keep using it. It's not."
Let's talk a little bit about that too. Is the lifespan, or the amount, like how long? And that's why I was curious about application. If it's just one time a day in the evening, I guess it depends on if we have if symptoms are managed or not. Maybe the recommendation is to break up the dosage throughout the day.
Yes, I prefer that.
Okay.
It would be more physiologic too, instead of increasing your dose and having bigger bolus at one time. What you're going to be using, it's going to last peak time. Excuse me, peak time 4 to 6 hours. So you have that activity each time instead of just one part in your day. I think that's really an important point. So I was working with a compounding pharmacy. The vast majority of women use twice a day dosing, a few 3 times a day for perimenopause, menopause, a few once a day, but they were the minority.
Okay, good to know. And so I know that it maybe can make some women sleepy. And so definitely one of those dose, potentially nighttime, and then maybe afternoon. Or would you recommend like morning and night with a gap in between? I guess you just figure it out what works best for you.
Yeah, there's some things to consider here. One of the thoughts that allopregnenolone, a metabolite of progesterone, is causing the drowsiness, that it can be as sedating as phenobarbital can be, which can knock you right out. And it's really funny. It was many years working in this pharmacy with this PMS high dosing that we had a clue that there was dizziness and drowsiness involved. So many women could take oral progesterone just fine. But then it started occurring. There were some that were getting this dizziness and sedation. And at the time, I did see one study done on 10 women. 9 had no problems with oral progesterone. The 10th was dizzy, drowsy, and they measured her allopregnenolone was higher than the others. So that's where some of this idea comes from. So we generally recommend a non-oral dosage form and go sublingual on the skin, vaginal, rectal, to avoid as much allopregnenolone. But I have heard of women with creams getting drowsy and dizzy. And I had my own first experience after all these years. I was gifted some progesterone capsules. So one morning I decided, well, I wonder how many I could take. I took 250 milligrams, and in short order, I was very groggy and dizzy. And I had a trainer come over, and he goes, "What's wrong with you? You look like you're drunk." And I said, "It's that progesterone." So I said, we have to have the workout, but we got to be careful because I'm not feeling too stable. And so with the workout, and then I had a big breakfast, and disappeared. It totally
metabolized it through.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is one technique. I wonder sometimes if it's not due to the higher doses when women take a bigger dose at that time and not spread it out, if there would be less propensity, because, I can take 100, 150 any time of day, and it doesn't make me drowsy at all. Just because I went to 250 that particular day, maybe that did me in. So it could be dose related too.
Yeah.
Something to check into. During the day, Dr. Michael Platt recommends, if you're trying to stabilize insulin and glucose, have your progesterone at a mealtime.
I love this. I wanted to have this conversation as well, because we hear a lot about estradiol being kind of the supporter or the protector of insulin sensitivity. Not as much as we don't hear enough conversation around the benefits of progesterone for metabolic health. And so when I heard you talking about this, I was like, I had to dig into this research even deeper than I had. Yeah, so to go on.
It's insulin glucose swings, insulin resistance. It's really, I always start with insulin and glucose are your major hormones.
Yeah, I've got my CGM on right now, measuring.
Good. I've been recommending it now, and the FDA approved an over-the-counter one too. So maybe we'll see more people doing it.
Oh, I didn't see that. That's great news.
I know. So this insulin glucose instability, I believe, probably causes the vasomotor stuff. And I've talked to a colleague, and she told me that her client was wearing one of the devices, and when she had a hot flash, her blood glucose went down to 40.
Wow. I think it's very connected to a driver of vasomotor symptoms. And when we say that, we're talking about hot flashes and night sweats.
Yeah.
Ladies.
Exactly. And so what happens in that circumstance, when your blood glucose is down so low, your body makes adrenaline to try to
counteract.
And this is adrenaline, which gets us all hyped up. It can cause this vasomotor instability, but then we're alert, anxious, we can't sleep because we're full flight and fright kind of hormone thing. And there's another piece of this too. The adrenaline is mainly metabolized with methyl groups. And so there are many women, I believe, that are poor methylators. So they get this big surge of adrenaline and they can't shut it off. Their liver doesn't have enough methyl groups to detoxify it. So I've been recommending to quite a lot of women, like a strong methylating B complex or SAMe, phosphatidylcholine, betaine hydrochloride. Some of these help them when they do get disturbed with the adrenaline, that you can move it on out.
Yeah, that is a big recommendation, honestly, to every woman I know, just in case, because most of us aren't looking at our genetic, if we're good methylators or not. And so I'm always recommending a methylated activated B vitamin and bringing in some of those other methylated agents that are going to help liver, any detoxification process, particular hormone metabolism. So I think that's always a good move. And I think these days, women are feeling the brunt of life and obligation. And so stress is happening quite often. And so I'm just like, let's just knock that out. And the reason why I was so interested in taking progesterone along with meals to kind of mitigate the blood glucose rise or spike is because, again, as we start to head into the perimenopause and into postmenopause, we do see a much more increased situation of insulin resistance and deregulated blood glucose. And so I love the idea. I was thinking, listening to your 250 milligrams of feeling a little bit of dizzy and drowsiness. And I thought, well, how do we mitigate that? And I was like, well, let's say it is a 400 milligram dose per day. What if it is dosed breakfast and lunch and then before bed? So you do 100, and then the 200.
Yes. I think it might be much more comfortable.
Yeah. And when you were speaking about comfortable earlier, you're really talking about symptom management, that women are feeling good. So let's actually move into women knowing that they're feeling good. You working with women with PMS symptoms, which honestly, I feel like is every woman. I don't know if I've ever met someone who,
I have a special guy in my life.
Oh,
and
nice.
I was talking to him and I was a bit whiny. He goes, "Are you on your period?"
That's hilarious.
I feel like,
this is the work that I do in the world.
He does. It's sort of a compliment. And I go,
that's hilarious.
I know. It's so cute. So where were we?
Symptoms. So symptoms, I want to open the door for the questioning around testing. So Right now, there's some big camps. I would say that in the, I would standard allopathic medicine, so NAMS doctors, ACOG doctors are going to say there's no reason to test your hormones, especially not in perimenopause. It's a moving target. And then in postmenopause, we already know where they are, and it really should just be managed via symptoms. And then you've got people in the functional space who are saying, okay, yes, symptom management matters at 100%. I don't, even if labs look ideal and you still feel like crap, there's something that's not right. But that we should be looking at hormones before hormone replacement therapy, and then after we get you started, to make sure that you're at least at a dosage worthy of prevention, like of again, osteoporosis or dementia or cognitive decline. Where do you land on this? Because you've looked at a lot of testing on women who are taking progesterone 6 minutes after, a day later, who knows? Like, I feel like it's a crapshoot. Like, can we even guess what we're looking at?
No, we can't. And we're sort of been taught to believe all this, believe the test over the person, right? You can walk into a doctor's office and have thyroid tests that are in the range, and you can be there with every low thyroid symptom in the world, like weight gain, pale skin, poor hair quality, very cold hands and feet, constipation. And if your TSH is in their range, you're dismissed. Nothing wrong with you. It's a horror thing, and we're conditioned to believe the tests, which is not good. Every single test out there has some advantages and has some disadvantages. But the biggest problem with testing is to believe that somehow a number you got on a test reflects your hormone milieu for your whole body. It simply does not. We already know, like, estrogen really concentrates in receptors in your breasts and your uterus and your ovaries. It's not in your serum necessarily. For those functions, it's busy over there, so you're not going to get. It's not in your saliva either, and it's not in your urine necessarily. Urine kind of reflecting what had happened,
right? The metabolites, yeah.
And so every single test modality makes an assumption that somehow this is a reflection of your whole body. What you can get from testing, and I just played serum testing, if you want to check somebody, and you should, I think, you could check and see if that person is absorbing from the dosage form you gave them. So for the most part, you should do serum like maybe 4 to 6 hour window after the last dose, and you should be consistent with that. Always do it at the same time.
Right.
You can have a dose response curve. It'll go up in your serum, down in your serum. And what information do you have then? The only information you have is you absorbed it. The rest,
what is it doing?
Right. The rest is your discussion about all the clinical signs and symptoms of these hormones. So that's what you have to rely on. You have to rely on the symptoms. I had a test once this woman sent me. I thought it was delightful. She had a saliva test done at three different times during the same day. One was normal, one was high, and one was non-detectable. Okay, what did you know from that test?
Well, that you need to dose up later.
You really didn't know anything.
You didn't know anything.
You had to ask.
Disappeared at some point. Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, as you've looked at a lot of serum testing, probably more serum testing than anything else. And I know there's a lot of camps between Dutch testing, urine metabolite versus serum versus saliva. A lot of people feel like saliva is a no-go at all. So at the end of the day,
this is what I've settled on, which is what I like to look at the most.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a full metabolic panel.
Me too.
That includes all the hormones. You want insulin and glucose. You want vitamin D. You want a complete thyroid panel. You want the sex hormones. You want the adrenal hormones. You want it all, because you don't know, just from peeling away part of these and looking at these, you don't know the whole story. Now, we talk about metabolites, like urine metabolites, they point out, oh, you don't want to metabolize into 4-hydroxyestrone. Well, what's wrong with that? It's a normal part of your metabolism. The next step is methylation. So you might think about how well is your methylation working? If this is happening on a serum test, you can look at homocysteine for methylation. Or you can do the genetic testing, you can get there. What about 16 alpha hydroxyestrone? That needs iodine and thyroid to get to estriol. So if you're seeing more of that metabolite, that's the direction you should go. But you would see it on your metabolic panel. You would see low thyroid things coming up. Like if it's iodine, you can't make thyroid hormones so well. So you see it on low T3, low T4. So it's one of the things you might want to get in there. So there's other ways to get to the same things, which probably is good to think about, monitor. So I really like this, and why I really, really, really like it is because now I can see insulin glucose things, the fasting insulin glucose, A1C, uric acid sometimes, triglycerides. It gives you a picture of, are we dealing with an insulin resistant person? We got to take care of that. And then the universe kind of brought me this. I had 6 clients in a row with extremely low cholesterol. They ranged from 86
Wow.
132. Of course, they were a hormone mess. They didn't have the raw material to make hormones. And so many times people are checking sex hormones and adrenal hormones and say, well, just put that back. But it's more foundational than that. Without enough cholesterol, you can't really repair your body and function very well. So having the metabolic panel to help is really change the picture and get to go a little deeper and find a little more relief for everybody.
I agree with you. I was going to say, at the end of the day, if what our hormones are meant to do not only is to help manage symptoms, but ultimately to increase our health span, aren't the biomarkers of our health span the thing that we really want to be looking for in terms of, are these hormones working for us, not only in the sense of, again, symptoms relief, but also in prevention over time? And so for me, I run annual full out metabolic panels, the full 9. And then I'm looking at what are the dosage, how are you doing? And then in relation to your entire kind of biomarker outlook. And that's what I'm always looking at. I'm never just looking at, oh, just estradiol or progesterone, and then nothing else on top of that. It just is not enough information for me to make a decision.
It really isn't. Oh, like that elusive estradiol level. There's practitioners saying we want to see 100, we want to see 150. Like, when do you want to see it? Immediately after you take it, or 24 hours later? And what about the 20, 30 other estrogens floating around your body? And on top of all the estrogenic effect you get from xenoestrogens and glyphosate and heavy metals and stuff, it's still a burden for your body to handle as estrogenic. So you have that one number for estradiol, whatever it is. It's a very poor reflection of what's going on throughout your body.
Yeah. And I'm just, and that's why I think those other markers are so important. Again, I think about the 4 horsemen, whether it's cancer or cardiovascular disease or dementia or even disease of frailty. A lot of these are silently happening behind the scenes. And so that's where I think those numbers can be helpful. Women are always shocked to hear that they're pre-diabetic. They had no idea,
No.
or that their other metabolic numbers, or even that they've got hypertension or something like that. And so that's why why I want to be looking at the entire panel, just to, and that's why I love hormones too, is I want to be able to have one more thing in the toolbox that's helping women live in a longer life and a high quality life, for as long as possible. But yeah, so I'm curious, you've been tracking progesterone for a very long time. How did we miss the boat? How is 20 milligrams in a cream okay? Or like how was 100 milligrams, every day okay? What happened there? What did estrogen rule out? I think you said pharma was the big reason. Premarin, was it?
Yeah, and then like along came Dr. John Lee.
Yeah, the 20 milligrams and his creams, whatever.
Yeah. So I did a lecture, one medical group. I did a little expose. I was trying to find out where he got his 20 milligrams. And I couldn't find any primary literature on
Didn't
this.
you just make it up?
Yeah. So I finally emailed Dr. Ray Peat, who inspired John Lee to use progesterone in the first place. And he said, so he sent me this abstract, little abstract, and it said from the, they've been able to measure 100 milligrams of progesterone per day in an ovarian vein.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I said, so where did he get the 20 milligrams? So he said, John Lee liked to make things up. But he was such a big advocate. He spoke everywhere.
Yeah, he was a huge advocate for progesterone for women.
His book is good. I liked his book, but then he got sucked into, you can only use so much, and then you have to test with saliva. And to this day, we're talking 30 years later in my career, nobody's got a good explanation why topical hormones go up so high in the saliva. One doctor had the best description yet. He said, topical hormones yield high saliva levels.
There you go.
It doesn't really say anything about any other body compartment. And so we have this thing, and this is, talk about being unscientific. There is some science behind saliva testing that I found some very good articles in Forensic Medicine of all places about.
Interesting. Yeah.
But so we have labs, they have let's say they have a normal progesterone level, and then they have one up here that's a treated progesterone level. Where do you get that from? You just made these numbers up. And when you get accused of being not scientific, that's justifiably so when you've done a makeup range for using progesterone to get to a certain part. And what's really dangerous about that is if it's going up above the laboratories picking up some numbers out of their butt, if your levels are higher in the saliva, you're told to decrease. And I wonder how many people have been injured by that philosophy, which John Lee was firmly in that camp and affected a lot of people's thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always the remedy to a lot of these side effects or these higher level, in whatever serum levels or saliva levels is decrease, get to low levels. And so maybe that was what was the play there. And I think just in general, I was just thinking about in hormone replacement therapy that, I mean, I guess from the get-go, from the 90s with Premarin, with the CEEs, it was always estrogen, and so maybe that's just kind of, we just have kept on that track.
Oh, so Premarin, that's how
or feminine forever, I don't know. Like, I don't know, where did we get this? This was in the 70s.
Powerful marketing behind it.
So powerful. It was the #1 drug in the 90s.
Yes. But having said that, I found a very nice article, and it identified 60 steroidal compounds in Premarin.
Yeah.
That's all the 4-ring structure with all these hormones. In this article, they identified so many of them as being estrogenic. They described some of them being progesterone-like and some of them being testosterone-like. So when we have a study and it's got Premarin in it, it's not an estrogen study. It's a study with all these hormones in it. And many of them foreign to the human body, but some of them identical to the human body. So it's a vast confusion in our whole literature about hormones because of the presence of that particular drug. Now, one day, a man called me and said his wife was having problems, and she was on Premarin and Provera.
Provera, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she ended
MPA probably.
He was a trainer for he trained the sales force. And I said, at least get her off Provera. But he said that they originally used pregnant women's urine when this was developed.
Yes, I remember that. Yep.
And then they switched to baboons, and then they switched to horses. The decision was economic. It was cheaper to use horses. So that's why they went in that direction. Nothing to do with human physiology and good therapy. It was,
no. It's, I was talking to Dr. Felice Gersh and just the atrocity of it all. Yeah. And then I know exactly where you stand regarding progesterone. It's where I stand. One of the things that kind of I don't love is that women in perimenopause, standard of care when we start to see what I consider to be menopausal symptoms is either hormonal birth control or progestin IUD when we should be doing progesterone. So I just would love for your take on that, because this, and what they'll do, let's say women are on an IUD, which is quote unquote local progestins, which is the biggest eye roll ever. Oh my gosh. And women are still really struggling with progesterone deficiency. Then they may also bring on like 100 milligrams of prometrium to kind of manage those kind of brain related progesterone deficiency symptoms. And so I just would love for you as an expert in this field to speak into that for me. I giggle about how ridiculous it all is.
It suddenly became very fashionable. Where it's really fashionable is for the women that are bleeding all the time.
The heavy bleeding.
And so they're putting in IUD with progestin, and sometimes it does diminish the bleeding, but sometimes it doesn't even do that. But what you've done is you've even blocked further your own progesterone, which would have saved you had you had enough. So it just kind of buys some time till ultimately you're going to be so frustrated that you'll agree to a hysterectomy, and that's the end game. So I don't like that. And then birth control pills. Years ago, there was a book named The Crisis in Women's Sex Hormones. It was sort of an expose on birth control pills. And I think Ross Pelton wrote one too called The Pill, about how dangerous these things are to your endocrine system. And just yesterday, I talked to a woman who's been on birth control pills for many, many years and tried to get off, but she just crash and burn with, she goes from synthetic hormones filling up all her receptors to nothing.
Because there hasn't been anything. It's a full shutdown. It's a massive endocrine disruption. Yep.
Yes. And so she stopped now, and I encouraged her. She's not feeling very good to use progesterone, use it very generously. And she wanted to know about estrogen and testosterone. And I said, forget it for now, because your birth control pills increase sex hormone binding globulin to abnormal heights. And we really don't have any studies, except for some going out probably about a year to 2 years. It still stays up from your birth control pill, and this interferes.
Like, it never comes down, from what I understand, for some women.
As far as they've checked. I mean, how long have they checked and what?
Yeah, I mean,
we don't know.
We don't know.
But I said I wouldn't even bother with estrogen, testosterone until you do some testing and check and see if your sex hormone binding globulin has come down to a normal level. There's no way it's going to do you any good right now. And I said progesterone is going to cover a lot of ground. Get secure in your progesterone, and then re-examine where the sex hormone binding globulin is. So people don't even understand. And one of the big problems too with a lot of the birth control progestins are interfering with your testosterone. There's a severe lack of libido, sexual interest, and there's dyspareunia, that the entrance to the vagina is full of receptors for testosterone. The birth control pill knocks it out.
Because progestin's binding those receptors.
Yes. So, and then you stop producing it, and you could check your hormones while you're on birth control pills. That's a waste of time.
Oh my God.
Yeah. You don't have any. Yet people get checked. I don't know what their doctors are thinking.
They don't know. They literally don't know that you don't run hormones when women are on hormonal birth control. Yeah. I just wanted to have you share your opinion on that, because I think the more that we hear from multiple experts, the more that we feel like we have more informed conversation, informed consent around it. I was just talking to a woman, oh gosh, bless her heart, was on the IUD for bleeding in early peri, was 52 when they took her off, had breakthrough bleeding for the first time, and the doctor freaked out and put her on the IUD again for another 4 years until she was 56 years old. And I was like, what is going on? And the whole time she had no idea it was systemic. You could just tell. I remember I was getting interviewed by her, and it was just this mouth drop open moment where she was like, what? And I was like, and I was just speaking into it, not particularly her. I didn't know she had been on this IUD. And oh man, the level, it took her a lot of time to process it after our interview, because she just felt, yeah, like the rug was slipped under her. She had horrible side effects and she was just so angry. And so it just broke my heart, because yeah, I wish she would have known, you know?
Yeah. And that's the problem here. And that's why I'm happy to be on podcasts.
Thank you.
And to do a lot of one-on-ones, but you can reach a whole lot more people, and you can reach a whole lot more people on social media. And we need to know, and we need to be empowered. When you're low in progesterone, which then you need to understand how to use it and master it, suddenly the whole demeanor changes, because until that point, women feel like they're the victim. They're out of control. They don't know what to do, and nothing seems to help, and they're helpless, and they talk to doctors, they talk to more doctors, and they waste a lot of time getting nowhere. When you use progesterone and you get those deficiency symptoms relieved, suddenly that empowers you and say, okay, I know it now. And I know how to adjust my dose. I know what this means and that means. And it's so empowering. And we need to have that, because we've given our own health authority away to the system for far too long. We need to do our own N-of-1 studies. Each ourself is a study, and what we use and how we use it. The trouble is with something like the IUD, I'm sure she went back to her doctor and said she had this and this and this, and totally dismissed. This is unacceptable.
Yeah.
You should not allow yourself to be in discomfort and things not working for you and just being dismissed. Unacceptable at any time. So women need to stand up for themselves, and men too. I don't like, some women like to trash men, like women's health is such a big issue. You have no idea how much men suffer too. They are at the mercy of the same system and have hormone problems too. Little progesterone will be good for your man.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Well, I want to just say thank you so big. Where can we, I know you do individual consults and you're working with people. And where's the best place to go and find you and learn more?
Okay, my website is the Wellness by Design Project.com, and I've got a lot of blogs, and I do a radio show with Corinne Finari, Take Charge of Your Health. We often talk about hormones and many other things. And I have a YouTube channel at the Wellness by Design Project.
Nice. Carol, honey, it was such a pleasure having you on and just getting to pull all of your expertise. And I hope everyone, you guys go check her out, her website, and go check out the YouTube channel if you want to dive deeper. I'm assuming you go into way more detail in a lot of the topics that we talked about today.
Yes, and I hope to put this one up there too. So.
Yeah, we'll get it to you. All right, have a good day.
Okay, great.